The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, everybody. Good morning from Nitro HQ in San Francisco, and thank you so much for attending today's webinar, Best Practices for Paperless Productivity. My name's Lauren Suggett, and I'm a Marketing Program Manager here at Nitro. We've got a great turnout for today's session, which should run for about 1 hour, including a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. For the Q&A, please feel free to submit your questions as they arise by typing them into the questions panel on the right side of your screen. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be made available to you in the next few days to share or view on demand as you like. All right, so to kick things off, I'd love to give just a real quick introduction of Nitro. Nitro is a document productivity company and was established in 2005 as the first ever alternative to Adobe's Acrobat PDF software. We've grown a ton over the past 10 years, expanding our offices, our employee base, and of course, our product offerings. With Nitro Pro, our desktop PDF software, along with Nitro Cloud, our recently released web application, Nitro truly makes it easy for businesses to share and collaborate on documents with anyone, online or offline, anytime and anywhere. And you know, that's really what document productivity is all about, isn't it? Succeeding in business today, it requires a certain level of agility. You've got to be mobile, you've got to be quick to act and respond, and that means being able to access your documents wherever you are and whenever you need them. Keeping things on paper makes it nearly impossible to work this way, unless you're the kind of person that's okay with keeping a filing cabinet strapped to your back. If there are any of you out there, hello and welcome. As attendees of today's session, you're obviously interested in learning about how you can break your paper habits and how that in turn can help you work more productively. Well, who would have thought I know just the guy to teach you how? I'm delighted to be joined today by Brooks Duncan, who will be leading our session. Brooks helps individuals and small businesses go paperless at documentsnap.com, where he writes about tools, workflows, and actionable tips for decreasing your dependence on paper. He's a certified management accountant and a former software developer and software support manager. Brooks joins us today from Vancouver, Canada. So a huge welcome to you, Brooks. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll go ahead and pass it over to you right now to get things kicked off. Here we go.
All right, thank you so much, Lauren. I have a new goal in life, which is to find a stock image of somebody walking around with a file cabinet strapped to their back. So I really like that. Yeah, so thank you so much, everybody. Hopefully you can see my screen now. And yeah, so I'm going to be talking about my very favorite subject, which is going paperless, of course, but also going paperless and best practices for paperless productivity.
And Brooks, is your presentation up right now?
Let's see here. Let me try this again. How is that? Can you see the screen now?
I think it's coming through.
Sorry about that.
It's a little slow for me, but I'm sure it's good for everybody else. Okay.
It's good. You can see it?
I think so.
Perfect. Okay. So, you know, my website, like Lauren said, documentsnap.com, is all about going paperless, and I have, you know, all sorts of resources for that. But the most popular areas of the site are my blog and my newsletter. And both of those are, my favorite thing about those is I get to hear from the DocumentSnap audience about how they are going paperless. And one time I was talking to one of my readers, we had jumped on the phone. Her name is Sherry Lee Mathers, and she runs a bookkeeping firm up here in British Columbia, Canada, called Balsam Way Bookkeeping. And she was actually, this is kind of a full circle thing, she was the one years ago who actually tipped me onto Nitro and told me about this tool that she can't live without, she told me. So it's kind of funny that I'm sharing this story now, but Sherry Lee was telling me about how this audit that she had just gone through with one of her clients. And so, you know, the auditor comes in and, you know, being all auditor-like, but Sherry Lee runs pretty much a paperless practice, as paperless as you can get anyway. And so when the auditor sat down with her, he was asking her, I want to see this statement, I want to see this check, and this and that and this and that. And because she had everything electronic, she had everything organized digitally, she had everything searchable, the second that the auditor asked for anything, she could just type it in, and it would instantly jump to write the document that he was looking for. And she just answered question after question after question. And the auditor told her at the end, when he was leaving, that he had actually booked 4 hours for this audit, but he was leaving after 2 hours. And he actually told her what a great experience this whole audit was. And I've never been audited myself, but I have to think if you have an auditor walking out the door early and complimenting you, you're doing something right. And that's just a quick example of how going paperless can help you boost your productivity. And usually when we hear about things around going paperless, we hear about things like, we hear about stuff like, going green, or, having a clean desk and that sort of thing. And, all that's really nice. But for me, going paperless, the main benefit is about productivity. It's about having access to the information that you need right when you need it. And so I'm going to talk about going paperless, but I'm going to talk about it from 3 main perspectives. The first is how you eliminate paper. So let's just work on the assumption that we have some paper that we want to get rid of. How do you do that? The second is how do you design a paperless workflow? And then the third area I want to focus on is how do you protect your electronic documents? How do you keep your paperless documents safe and secure? Now, this is going to sound a little strange considering, what I do and even the title of this talk, but I'm actually not a huge fan of the word paperless. It's the word that everybody uses, and so I use it too. But I feel like when people use that word paperless, it almost creates this false expectation of this ideal state where people have completely gotten rid of all of their paper in their life or in their business. I also feel like it almost creates this almost dividing state where people say things like, oh, I could never go paperless because I like writing in my notebook, or I could never go paperless because I need to print something out to read it, or I could never go paperless because I love reading paper books. And to me, going paperless is not about doing away with things that work for you and taking activities away. I was listening to a podcast a while ago. The podcast is called In Beta, and the hosts were talking about this subject, and I really like the way that one of the hosts put it. His name's Kevin Purdy. And what he was saying is, when you're pledging to go paperless, you're pledging not to create more paper for other people or yourself than you need to. And I would actually add to that and say you're also pledging not to keep more paper than you need to. So it's not about doing without stuff. It's not about getting rid of all of the paper. Chances are that's probably not going to happen. It's just about being more mindful of the paper that you use and being more mindful about the paper that you keep and eliminating where appropriate. So I'm going to be talking about a lot of resources, a lot of tips, a lot of tools. I'll probably be referencing some, blog posts and stuff that I've done. So what I've done is, so you don't have to go crazy writing down all these URLs and stuff like that, I've put together this resource page for you, and it's live right now, and it's going to stay up. It's not like a limited time thing. You can go back and refer to it whenever you'd like. And everything that I talk about today will be linked to from this resource page. So, and I'll repeat this, this URL at the end as well. All right, let's get into it. So let's say that you have some paper that you want to eliminate. How do you go about doing that? Well, for me, the most important first step is to start with the goal. What is it that you're actually trying to do? Because when you have something that where are you right now and where are you looking to get to? Because when you have that goal in mind, you always have something that you can evaluate decisions against and you have something that you can all keep moving towards. The next thing is to audit your paper, and what I mean by that is, take a look at the paper you're using and take a look at the paper that's coming in and just see, how is all this stuff being used? Where is it all coming from? And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. The next step is to get buy-in. So if you're in a business and you're in an organization, you'll definitely want to make sure that you have senior management approval and belief for this change that you're trying to make, because it's going to be very difficult to make these kinds of changes if people above you are not on board. But it's not just about getting management approval. It's not a top-down thing. Ideally, what you want to do, again, this is in a business, is talk to the people that are actually going to be working with these documents and get them involved in the process as early as you can. Have them feel ownership with the changes that you're looking to make. And this even applies not just in business, but if you're going paperless at home. One thing that really surprised me as I was getting into starting the website and writing about going paperless, is I'd start getting emails from people saying, oh, I'm totally paperless, but my husband doesn't want to do it, or I'm completely paperless, but my wife has paper everywhere. What do I do? And I realized, oh my gosh, I thought I was sitting here writing about technology, and all of a sudden I'm doing marriage counselor here. So you want to try and get the people involved as early as possible. The next step is to do a small pilot project. If this is going to be a big change, start small. Start just changing one particular area and show some early successes. Learn where you're going to hit snags and how to work around them. And it'll be much easier to roll this out into a larger context if you have some quick wins that you can show at the beginning. And finally, what you want to do is you want to, once you have things going, is periodically review them. How is things going? Where can you make some changes that will improve things later? And what can you do more efficiently? You can start simple and then improve later on. Now, one exercise that I really recommend, and this is what I was talking about when I talked about auditing paper, is to sit down and take stock of where your paper is coming from. And it can be a really helpful exercise to actually figure that out. Do you have, employees printing stuff off and leaving it beside the printer? I'm sure every workplace has that tray beside the printer of things that people have printed out. Do you have bills and statements and stuff like that coming from vendors? Do you have statements and checks coming from banks? Do you have forms, paper forms? You can get a lot of efficiency gain by switching from paper-based forms to electronic forms. Contracting is another area where businesses have made huge productivity gains by switching from, getting that, sending stuff around, documents around for signatures, to going to an electronic paperless signing workflow. Things like catalogs and other material that's coming in. And what you want to do is you want to sit down and just figure out, where is all the paper coming to in my business or at home? And then where does it make sense, first of all, to eliminate? If you can go through and just cut some of this off that you don't even need anymore, that's great. Other areas, it may make sense to shift it to digital. And some places you might find that it actually makes sense to keep it paper, and that's fine too. It's all about making the changes that will actually have benefit for you. Now, once you've kind of audited this out and you're ready to start with the project, what I don't recommend you do is just go buy a scanner and start scanning. What you want to do is you want to take a step back and think about, what is the workflow going to be? How is this going paperless thing actually going to work? And ideally you want to think about this before you start. So it can be really helpful to take a step back and whatever tool you use to map this out. It might be a flow chart, it might be a mind map, it might be, drawing on paper. Don't tell me if that's the case, but whatever makes sense for you, what you want to do is you want to sketch out, where is the paper coming in? Where is it physically going to be located? At what point is it going to be scanned? Who is going to be doing the scanning? Where is that paper going to be going after it's scanned? Once something is digitized, where are those PDFs going to go? These things can be really helpful to map out first, so you're just kind of plugging in and implementing the changes as you go through the workflow, instead of trying to figure this stuff out bit by bit. And usually when we're talking about going paperless, the first thing we all think about, of course, is capturing paper. How do we take paper and make it digital? And the most common way to do that is, you see there in the picture right there, is to use a scanner. And what happens a lot of times is somebody will say, I'm going to go paperless, and what they'll do is they'll try and use, that old flatbed that they bought to scan pictures a while ago. Or they'll use the all-in-one scanner that came with their printer and that sort of thing, the built-in scanner. And those can both work. I'm not saying you can't go paperless using those. But if you have a decent volume of paper and you're going to be scanning on a regular basis, or you have a large backlog of paper to go through, it will really make sense to invest in a document scanner. There's actual scanners that are made specifically for scanning documents. There's lots of different models and brands out there. I just want to start on touching on a few things that will really help you productivity-wise when you're looking at scanners. And the first is you want to pick up a scanner that has an automatic document feeder. So what that means is instead of feeding in paper one sheet by one sheet, it allows you to take a stack of paper, a whole multi-page document, or a stack of single sheet documents, just allows you to put them in the scanner and then scan them all at once versus one by one. Another feature that really helps with productivity is having a dual-sided scanner, or a scanner that can scan duplex. And ideally, we've all worked in offices with the scanner that will scan one side of the page and then you hear it grinding as it's flipping the paper over and then scanning the other side of the page. That works, but ideally you want a document scanner that can scan both sides of the page at once. It just makes things much faster and much more efficient. Again, lots of different types of scanners out there. The Neat scanners are very popular. You see that on the left-hand side. They have a scanner called Neat Receipts, which is a small little handheld one. Their desktop model is called the Neat Desk. The model you see there on the screen is called the Neat Connect. And one interesting feature of that one is it allows you to scan to cloud services without needing to go to a computer. It does it all wirelessly, and you don't need to have a computer kind of in the middle. The scanner you see there on the right is by Fujitsu. It's called the ScanSnap, and that's actually the scanner that I use. I get that asked out quite a bit, what type of scanner do you use? That model you see there is called the IX500. And again, all of these models are linked to on the resource page that I talked about earlier. The IX500 is their desktop model. It's their fastest ScanSnap. It is also a wireless scanner, though it needs to scan to either a computer or to a mobile device. It won't scan directly to the cloud. ScanSnap has a kind of smaller model called the S1300i, which is, they call it their personal size. I really like that scanner for home use or really small office use because it's a small, pretty portable scanner, but it also has a 10-sheet document feeder, so it's a great balance of size and scanning capacity. And this webinar is actually really good timing because just yesterday, Fujitsu released a new mobile scanner called the IX100, and that's a little scanner that you can throw in a bag if you travel a lot or go from site to site, and that is a wireless scanner as well. like I said, lots of different types of scanners. Happy to answer any questions on those in the question period. But scanners are not the only way to capture paper. Nowadays, the cameras on our smartphones are getting so good and the apps are getting so good that our smartphones actually make a pretty decent document scanner. You're probably not going to want to sit there and scan, a 20-page document with your phone, but for capturing one-off scans, for capturing receipts and stuff like that, smartphones actually and tablets actually make great scanners. Lots of different apps that will do this. Scanner Pro is a really good app for iOS. ScanBot is a good app for iOS and Android, and Genius Scan is another good app for iOS and Android. And those are all different price points. Again, linked to on the resource page. So it may be worth it if you're not already doing mobile scanning. Take a look at some of the apps, see which ones you like the best. Now, what happens a lot when we're going paperless is we start scanning all these documents, and then all of a sudden, oh no, where the heck did I put everything? And one of my readers wrote me an email one time that I love. I just love the way he put it. His name's John Yeager, and he wrote me and he said, Brooks, going paperless sounds great, but I don't want to trade a physical paper mess for a digital mess. And when he wrote that, I'm like, yes, that is exactly right. That exactly describes it. Because at least when we have a physical paper mess, we know we have a problem. We can see it. But with a digital mess, a lot of times we don't even realize we have a problem until we have a problem, until we can't find something that we're looking for. So the biggest question I get on Document Snap around going paperless is around organization. How do I organize my electronic documents? And for me, when I think about organization, I think of it from two main perspectives. The first is having a consistent and descriptive naming convention for your documents. And the second is having a folder structure that works well for you and your business. Now, if you're an extremely large business, you could go even further with document metadata and stuff like that. I'm not going to get into that as much, but for small businesses, medium-sized businesses, naming convention and folder structure are the key things to focus on. And for me, I want to talk about naming convention first, because the more I work with paperless documents, the more I become convinced that having a consistent and descriptive naming convention is the biggest thing that you can do to be able to find your documents later. Because that's what it's about. That's what it's about, right? It's not about how do we capture our documents. It's how can we find our documents later when we need them. So how do you name your documents? I was a friend of mine, a guy named Brett Kelly. He wrote an ebook called Evernote Essentials, and at the very first Evernote conference, I was sitting there in the audience, and he was giving a talk, and he was talking about his approach to naming notes, and I liked the way that he put it, and I kind of ripped this off and apply it to electronic documents as well. And what Brett was saying, and what I say as well, is when you're naming your documents, what you want to do is you want to think of your future you. And what we mean by that is when you're scanning this document, you know what it is because you're the one saving it. But what about in a year, in 2 years? What if you need to find this document in 5 years? Or what if somebody else needs to be able to find this document? So what you want to do is when you're saving this document and giving it a name, you want to think up what are some words that I might use to look for this document later, and then work those into the file name as appropriate. Beside those future you words, another thing that I recommend is putting the date in the file name. You may be saying that, computers have create dates and modify dates for files, so that might seem unnecessary, but those create dates and modify dates can very easily become messed up. So I find it a lot easier just by looking at a list of files to be able to see that date in the file name. Some people like putting the name at the beginning. That's actually what I do. Some people like putting it, near the end or in the middle. There's no right or wrong answer. It really depends on just what makes the most sense to you. So let's say we had a document and it was for August 31st, so I might have in my file name, I might start my file name with just the date, 2014-08-31. And let's say it's some document for a Comcast, like a bill or an invoice or something like that. So applying that principle of future you, I would probably have the word Comcast in that file name. And for some people, that might be enough. For me personally, I have lots of documents that are just, if it's just a bill or something like that, I might just have date-comcast.pdf, and I know that that's what it is. Now, for you, you may work with different types of documents for Comcast, so you might not need to specify a bit more. You might need to go into a bit more detail to be able to know you can find and identify this document later without having to open it up. So for you, maybe you would call it Comcast invoice. Now, maybe you're somebody who works with clients or works on projects or that sort of thing. It can be really helpful to include some sort of identifier for the client or the project in the file name. So again, you can see what this is without having to open it up. That's the key. I was talking to somebody who works in an accounting firm one time, and she was telling me what they do, and I really recommend this, is they all got together, the people who would be working with these documents, this is going back to that get buy-in thing, they all got together and they came up with a shared naming convention for their organization. And so what they decided to do that's worked really well for them is they have a code which is the first 3 letters of the client's last name and the first 3 letters of the client's first name, and they include that code in every file that has to do with that client. So going by that example, if this was something for me, maybe this would be the file name for a code for my name. You would probably have something different, and you will know just by evaluating your documents what would make sense for you. An area where people get hung up on is, should it be Comcast-invoice or Comcast_invoice or Comcast-invoice? It really doesn't matter as much as people think it does. The key, though, is to be consistent, and I'm going to talk about some tools that will help with that in a bit. So this might be a sample file name that you might build. For you, it might look different. For me, it would look different. We're all going to have different naming conventions. There's no one right naming convention. It's the one that's right for you. Now, once you know what your document is going to be called, of course, then you need to figure out where are you going to put it. And this is when we start talking about, do you store your documents on your Mac computer or your Windows computer? Do you keep it on a network drive or a network attached storage or something like that? Or do you store it in the cloud? Do you store it in Box or Evernote or Nitro Cloud or, all these sorts of cloud platforms? And this is, again, no one right or wrong answer to this. You need to think about what are your requirements. What are your security requirements? What are your compliance requirements? What, who needs to have access for this stuff, to these documents? Is it just you? Is it your work group? Who do you need to share these documents with? There's all these things you want to think about, and that will help you down the path to choosing your platform. Once you have a platform, another area where people become really stuck is choosing the best folder structure. We all want the right folder structure or the best folder structure. And of course, like anything else, there is no one right folder structure that will work for everybody. It really depends on the documents you have in your business, what kind of business you are, if you're at home, what your home situation is. But even worse, all of our brains work differently as well. What made perfect sense for me might just seem, untenable to you and vice versa. So it has to be something that will make sense to you and your business. One thing I will say that I've seen used very successfully is if you have a filing structure that works well for you with your paper files, a lot of people find success in migrating that structure to your paperless files as well. It just becomes like one less piece of learning you have to do when migrating over, one less thing that you need to learn or your employees need to learn. So that's something to think about as well. But we are talking about best practices for paperless productivity. And one thing that I see quite a bit, and we all do it, I've done it as well, is when we're working with these electronic files, we tend to make these really deep hierarchical folder structure, layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, more folders with less files in each. And you can definitely do that. It's absolutely not wrong. If that works for you, awesome. You have to go with what works for you. But we're talking about best practices for paperless productivity, and I can tell you that it can be more efficient and more productive to have a more shallow folder structure, to have less folders with more files in them. And this becomes possible when we have our consistent and descriptive naming convention, and we learn how to look for documents, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. I was reading this article it's linked to on the resource page. It's by a nurse, actually, who is somehow a nurse that's really into going paperless, and she writes about it for ZDNet. And I really like the way she put it. Her name's Denise Amrich, and she wrote, "Every time we reduce the number of keystrokes, touch gestures, or seconds it takes to access desired data, we decrease the barriers to paperless." And I really believe that, because going paperless is like any other change you're looking to make. We as human beings are amazing at finding the smallest excuse not to do something. And the more clicks you have to do, the more digging through folders you have to save a file, the more digging through folders you have to look for a file, the more likely it is that you're not going to keep up with going paperless. So you want to make things as quick and easy as possible. Now let's take a step back again and look at our processing. How does a document work its way through your paperless workflow? We capture the document, we save it, we give that document a name, and then of course it gets filed away. And this is almost professional organizing 101 for physical paper, but for me, when working with electronic documents, paperless documents, I'm a big believer in saving everything to a central inbox. So having a folder or whatever you use for capturing documents, for me it's actually a folder on my computer called Inbox. And everything I scan goes to that one folder, and everything I save goes to that one folder. And then I name and I file them away from there. I do this for a couple reasons. For one, it may seem like it would be more efficient to scan a document and then right when you scan it, name it and file it away. Scan the next document, name, file. Scan the next document, name, file. I've actually timed this out, and it's actually faster. Instead of doing that, I mean, you can definitely do that. If you want to do it that way, go right ahead. But I've actually timed it out, and it is actually faster and more efficient to instead scan everything to an inbox folder and then work through your files, naming them and filing them that way. So I like this for efficiency purposes. It is a bit faster to do it that way. But the main reason I like doing it is by capturing everything to one central place, it opens the door for automation. There's some automation tools that can really, really help with going paperless. And the first type of automation tool that I'm a big fan of is something called a text expansion tool. And there's a lot of different tools that do this. On the Mac, there's Text Expander. On Windows, there's one called Breevy. And actually, Breevy can read text expander libraries for you cross-platform people. What these allow you to do is create small snippets of text that automatically expand when you type them in to larger blocks of text. And I'm not going to get too much into that. I've linked on the resource page to a video that shows how it works, because this is one of those things that's easier to show than explain. Really helpful everywhere on your computer, complete game changer, but it's really killer for naming your electronic documents. Really, really helpful for naming paperless documents. Another type of automation tool that's great is something on the Mac. There's a tool called Hazel. On Windows, there's a tool called File Juggler. And these are kind of more simple tools. If you're a more complex business with more complex document requirements, you can, of course, get much more complex and expensive tools. FSsoft makes one, Abby makes one, EMC, Kofax. There's lots of these tools out there. But basically what these tools allow you to do is watch a folder. So for example, Inbox that I was talking about earlier. And if these tools see a document that you scanned that meets some sort of criteria that you've established, it will name them and file them away for you. So these tools take a lot of the heavy lifting out of going paperless. And I'm a big fan of automation tools for a couple reasons. The first is, of course, speed. The less we have to do and the more our computer does do for us, the better. But also, I love them because they help enforce consistency. Because our computers are doing them for us, chances are they're going to be done right and the same way every single time. Usually when documents get misfiled or misnamed, it's not a technology issue. 9 times out of 10, it's a person issue. It's a human issue. So we want to help enforce consistency with automation where possible. A lot of what I've been talking about has been about scanning documents and storing them away, archiving them, which is great, which is a big part of going paperless. But a lot of us work with PDFs. And if you're somebody who just needs to view and print the occasional document, built into Mac OS X and Windows, there's some decent tools for working with PDFs that can get you by in a lot of cases. But if you're somebody who works with a lot of PDFs on a regular basis in your job, or even if you do it a lot at home for whatever reason, there's actually tools out there that will help edit, manipulate, and work with these documents. On the Mac, a great tool is called PDF Pen. On Windows, I assume you're familiar with Nitro Pro since you're on a Nitro webinar. And these tools allow you to do a lot. They allow you to sign documents. They allow you to create forms and edit PDFs. Going back to that Sherry Lee Mathers example I talked about earlier, and I actually got a similar story recently from a friend of mine who's an actuary. What they do is if they have a big project with a lot of different PDFs that they have to work with, one thing they do is they use a tool like PDF Pen or Nitro. They merge those documents all together into one big PDF, create a table of contents, and then they're working just from that one document. They don't have to have PDFs all over the place working with. It just makes life more efficient and more productive. So if you're somebody who works with a lot of PDF documents on a regular basis, it's worth looking into these tools. One thing I find interesting, though, is we put a lot of attention on capturing documents, organizing documents, working with documents, but when it comes to actually looking for a document that we need, we kind of do it the way that we've always done it since I was in elementary school at my library. We want to find a document, so we basically do the digital equivalent of going to find the drawer, opening it up, leafing through to find the folder, and then leafing through that folder to find the documents that we're looking for. And again, nothing wrong with that. If that works for you, that's absolutely awesome. But since we're talking about best practices for paperless productivity, I can tell you that the biggest productivity gain you can possibly get from going paperless is learning how to search, learning how to zero in and find the document that you're looking for. And we're kind of lucky, we have fortuitous timing that pretty much all the platforms that we use to store documents now, whether it's Mac OS X or Windows or these cloud services that we use, they all have the ability to search, or most of them, search for documents not just by the name, which we've always been able to do, but by the text inside the document. The problem is we kind of hear about this, and then we try it out, and we'll type in some search term and just get a whole bunch of junk back. And probably the document that we're looking for is in that list somewhere. But if we're going to have to wade through a big list, we might as well just go back and look through our folders the way we've always done it. So what I've done is on the resource page, on my website I have this product called the Paperless Document Organization Guide, and it has this chapter on how to search for documents on Mac and Windows. And what I've done is I've kind of extracted that chapter out for you and linked to it on the resource page. So you can just download that for free. And I really recommend sometime when you have a few minutes, sit down and just learn how the search works on the platform that you're looking for. Because with some very easy controls when you're searching, you can just zoom right in. And when we start bringing this stuff that I've been talking about together, when we start having that consistent and descriptive naming convention, and we have our documents searchable, usually just by checking off a setting in our scanning software, and we learn how the search for our platform works, when we bring these things together, we just become like paperless ninjas. We can just instantly bring up the document that we're looking for right when we need it. And it becomes really impressive. You just look like a star when you can do that for somebody. And I've had people tell me, one of my readers, a guy named John Seversky, he wrote me an email one time, and he's in real estate on the East Coast, and he was telling me that because he's pretty much entirely paperless, and he's kept this archive of pretty much every document he's ever worked with any property, and he's become an expert at searching, that he actually feels that he wins deals based on his ability to access information faster than anybody else. So this stuff can have real business impact. So I definitely recommend you learn how to search. Now for me, the most important part of going paperless is not how you scan documents, it's not how you organize documents, it's not how you search for documents, although that's very helpful. For me, the most important part of going paperless is making sure that your electronic documents are protected, making sure your electronic documents are safe and secure. And when we're talking about electronic files, the approach that I take, and I definitely recommend the approach that you take, is to work off the assumption that something is going to happen to your documents, that your documents are all going to disappear tomorrow. And we've all heard horror stories. There's that old cliche, there's two types of hard drives, those that have crashed and those that will crash. And we all hear that we need to back up our computers. That's like, by this point, it's like you need to eat your vegetables. We hear it all the time. But when we're talking about going paperless, it's absolutely not optional. You have to have an effective backup system because you will someday lose documents. So for me, when I talk about backing up, I recommend backing up to at least 2 locations. The more the merrier. I personally back up to 4, but I'll let you off the hook a little bit and say to at least 2 locations. I recommend backing up to at least 1 local location. So that could be, an external hard drive plugged into your computer, or some sort of file server on the premises, and at least 1 offsite location. So whether that's like an online backup service like CrashPlan or Backblaze or something like that, or setting up some sort of offsite setup, you want it to be automated if possible and offsite. And on the resource page, I've linked to a video I made that kind of shows different types of backups and how they work. And I linked to a blog post I did that shows how I have an offsite backup system set up between me and a friend where we back up to each other's house. Now, backup is super important, like I said, the most important thing, but you may want protecting electronic documents is not necessarily just about backing up. You may have sensitive information that is scanned that you wouldn't want other people to see. And one way to deal with that is using encryption. And there's lots of different types of ways you can encrypt your documents. You can password protect and encrypt individual files. Something like Preview on the Mac, which is built in, can do that. Nitro Pro can do that on Windows. You can create encrypted disks that you save things to. One thing you may want to look at is encrypting your entire drive. So that on the Mac, for example, there's a setting called File Vault that you just turn on, and if somebody were to get your computer, even if they took the hard drive out, they still wouldn't be able to read your information. On Windows, certain versions of Windows have a feature called BitLocker that you may want to look into or talk to your IT people about if that's your situation. More complex, there's rights management systems that you can get involved with that will actually protect documents and make it so that only certain people can access, and I know Nitro works with that, so you may want to look into that as well. The key is you want to make sure, A, that if something happens to your documents, it is a complete non-event. You can have your entire document archive back almost instantaneously. And B, if that's something important to you, you want to make sure that your documents, if they were to fall in the wrong hands, wouldn't do anyone else any good. So I've talked about a lot of different things that can be involved with going paperless and taking paperless productivity to the next level. There's a lot of different ways you can go. There's a lot of different tools you can use. But I do want to say that, and what happens is, a lot of times we get into almost analysis paralysis. We know we want to make a change like this, so we go out and we start reading and reading and reading all this stuff, and I'm as guilty as anyone as creating a lot of this material. But we just read and read and read, but we never actually take action. But I can tell you that going paperless does not have to be complicated. You can just start with a scanner. Just to get started, any scanner will do. Create a simple, high-level folder structure that makes sense for you. Make sure everything's backed up. And just start. Just see how it works for you. And the nice thing about working digitally with paperless documents is everything can be improved and iterated on later. I would be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you so much. And here's that link to the resource page again.
Awesome, Brooks. That was great. I really appreciate you walking us through that. I am going to take back control of the presentation now so we can get into answering